I'm going to go in rant mode. Usually I like Eckhart's letter and the videos that we react to. But this one came up in recommended and I have a bone to pick with it. And I don't know what it is. But it seems like since I watched Corey's video on him saying the TCW changes to the law are overblown, which then he tries to say it wasn't how people interpret it. But how are you supposed to interpret it when the title literally says overblown controversy of Clone Wars law? How do you think people are going to interpret it and what you said in the video? Anyway, this seems tangentially connected with somehow spreading misinformation about things. But now EcksClips had a video titled George Lucas thought KOTOR was BS. I watched it, that's why I've prepped a source that disproves part of it, which then can go on to saying most of it. So I'm gonna say, yeah, I don't know what it is, but him and Corey are on a podcast together, which is also where I'm like, maybe there's something with they want to spread misinformation. Who knows? But it's just wrong anyway. It might be quite. Let's put it anyway.
Although fans love the Old Republic and the idea of there being multiple Jedi-Sith wars, that wasn't really what George Lucas envisioned. There's an excellent StarWars.com article, which is called An Oral History of Episode 1, and
Alright, we're gonna make sure to look at the source. Oh, look! He already lied. It's not linked. An Oral History of Episode 1. Yeah, I think this must be it. Okay.
in that, George Lucas talks about his original idea for the Sith. This is his quote. Everyone said, oh, well, there was a war between the Jedi and the Sith. Well, that never happened. That's just made up by fans or somebody. What really happened is the Sith ruled the universe for a while, 2,000 years ago. Each Sith has an apprentice, but the problem was each Sith Lord got too powerful and the Sith would try to kill each other. Now, to be fair, you can read George Lucas's quote holistically with the rest of Star Wars history. That's part of the reason why KOTOR takes place 4,000 years ago, and why the events of the Darth Bane trilogy take place when they do, but it's pretty clear that the idea of repeated wars between the Jedi and the Sith, while canon to Legends through Tales of the Jedi, KOTOR, and more, were not how George Lucas saw things. Make sure to sub and consider...
So, okay.
How George Lucas saw things. Make sure to sub and consider...
He was saying, okay, they're not canon, they're not how George Lucas saw things. Well, what we have here is the letter to the editor for Tales of the Jedi, The Fall of the Sith Empire #1. In this is an interview with Kevin J. Anderson answering fan letters. So, I'll read out the letter, I guess, is a good idea for context. The recent series, The Golden Age of the Sith, has prompted me to write this letter. I feel that the portrayal of the dark side and the Sith is all wrong. I've always thought of the Sith as opposite of the Jedi. A Sith is in the dark side, as a Jedi is to the light. Hence, the Dark Lord of the Sith is Lord of all dark side users. When comparing the dark side to the light, you will notice a lot of the powers and abilities are the same. For example, the telekinetic choke, Vader used it to choke Imperial officers. Luke used the same power to choke Gamorrean guards in Jabba's palace. Another example is far-seeing. Yoda was teaching it to Luke when he discovered something wrong on Cloud City. The Emperor used the same power when he set forth his plan at the Battle of Endor. Jedi use the Force when they are calm and at peace, not really letting emotions, or I should say negative emotions, control it or them. Sith are exactly the opposite, letting the negative emotions control it, feeding them with power. I've always thought of the Force as a mental power, and that's up to the individual to decide how to use it. Jedi bond with the Force, coexist with it, uses power to bring peace, and their reward is to spend eternity with fellow Jedi in a luminous state, adding to the personal wisdom to the Force. Sith feed upon the Force with their negative emotions. Their reward is personal, immediate, easy power. I think the portrayal of the Sith as aliens that the Dark Jedi dominated is ludicrous. Darth Vader is more than a dominator of poor little aliens. Give him credit. I could be wrong, but that's my opinion. Now, before I read the response, I'm going to replay this part in the video, because this is the part that I take a lot of issue with.
While canon to Legends through Tales of the Jedi, KOTOR, and more were not how George Lucas saw things.
So, you want to say, this is a quote from a Tales of the Jedi letter to the editor, Kevin J. Anderson, the person that wrote it, said, "Sorry you don't like the framework of the Jedi, of the Sith and the Dark Jedi, Chris, but that background came directly to us from George Lucas. We're following his guidelines and building a story within the parameters he himself laid down. It may not match with your own ideas, but this is George's universe, and he gets to establish the rules. We just try to tell the best story we can within them." This directly means, never mind that it was approved and published, George gave it the tick of approval to be published. He also gave them the backgrounds for the Sith, and all of that. Tales of the Jedi was, the 90s. And now, this is how I interpreted this. Let's see this quote in the context of this. Now, where was that quote that he mentioned again?
Episode 1, and in that, George
I
Lucas
just need to
talks
get
about
the
his
wording
original
for
idea
searching
for
it.
the Sith. This is his quote. "Everyone said, oh, well, there was a war between the Jedi and the Sith.
Okay. So I want to look at the context of this quote and see how it is in relation to how he put it in the context. The story for episode 1, dubbed The Beginning in early drafts and through production, would center around Jedi Knights Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi, Queen Amidala and the accidental discovery. Okay. It's all based on backstories I'd written, setting up what the Jedi were, setting up what the Sith were, setting up what the Empire was, setting up what the Republic was, and how it all fit together. I spent a lot of time developing those elements and what each planet did and why they did it the way they did. So I had all this material, a lot of story elements were given. So this itself says that this is part of what he had set up for giving to authors as well, and why he went, no, this is how the origin of the Sith are. Early on, it was that Anakin had been more or less created by the midichlorians, or that the midichlorians had a very powerful relationship to the Whills from the first draft of Star Wars. The power of Whills and all that, I never really got a chance to explain the Whills part. So a lot of the story of the prequels I'd done already, and now I was just having to put it into a script and fill it in. Kind of sew up some of the gaps that were in there. So a lot of this part as well, when he said it's already done already, Tales of the Jedi came out before the prequels. Let me double check. Tales of the Jedi, the Fall of the Sith Empire, from where the quote was from. Issue 1 was in 1997, which was around about the same time as, well, it would have been when The Phantom Menace was in production. I'd already established that all the Jedi had a mentor with Obi-Wan and Luke, and the fact that that was a bigger issue. That's the way the Jedi actually worked. But it was also the way the Sith worked. There's always a Sith Lord and then the apprentice. Yeah. Especially with the Bainite line of Sith and all that. Everybody said, oh, well, there was a war between the Jedi and the Sith. Well, that never happened. That's just made up by fans or somebody. What really happened is the Sith ruled the universe for a while, 2,000 years ago. Each Sith had an apprentice, but the problem was each Sith Lord got to be powerful, and the Sith Lords would try to kill each other because they all wanted to be the most powerful. So in the end, they killed each other off, and there wasn't anything left. So the idea is that when you have a Sith Lord and he has an apprentice, the apprentice is always trying to recruit somebody to join him, because he's not strong enough, usually, so that he can kill his master. That's why I call it a rule of two. There's only two Sith Lords. There can't be any more because they would kill each other. They're not smart enough to realise that if they do that, they're going to wipe themselves out, which is exactly what they did. So the context of this is 100% in the context of the prequels and talking about the rule of two, which was what his story follows, the story that he's written. So this article came out in 2019, which I'm also going to take into account as post-buyout, post-sidelining of the EU. Would they edit the article to give wrong context? Because how do we know this is a direct quote from Lord George Lucas? Well, I guess we kind of have to trust that it is. Let's see if there's any information about the context here, or if this is just them pulling a quote randomly out of somewhere. But obviously, it seems like because he approved of Tales of the Jedi and gave the background of the origin of the Sith and all that to Kevin J. Anderson to work with, blatantly said, no, Kevin, your version is not how the Sith came to be, I want mine. And they are given the guidelines and building a story within the parameters he himself laid down. I don't see, even with the quote of George can change his mind a lot. But this is talking about Phantom Menace, and he's thinking of it in the context of that, of course. So that's where that quote is, 2019 article. Is there anything else? You have... This is always a constant. There's always Sith masters and the apprentices are trying to kill them. This is throughout the entire history. There's different iterations of it. SWTOR is probably the one that diverts the most, if anything. And that is things. Yeah, why is it called Star Wars if there aren't wars? Exactly. Star Peace. But he's obviously talking about the rule of two when it's in context here. And then even before then, any Sith that tried to break the tradition of the rule of two, even meta-wise, did worse in the story. Actually, SWTOR's base game has you are one apprentice with one master. Everything in the lore goes towards, well, obviously it's going to fall apart. But how... There needs to be some explanation for if it's this long, why have the Sith survived? That is a thing too. But yeah, I find this really disingenuous to put this as a clip and try to say, oh, that's that. And clearly George approved of the publication. He actually gave the background and setup of how the Sith were to the authors. And I wish that article actually listed the source of, like, okay, when did George say it? Oh, that's the wrong one to go in the history and find. Because it clearly doesn't line up with things, and anything post-2014 makes me suspicious. Because then, after 2014, they're trying to give it a certain perspective and try and discount the expanded universe. Is there a video of this? Probably not. But also, this really doesn't address the point, does it? Because he doesn't then go, okay, well, you've said that. What about Tales of the Jedi comics that came out and stuff? It's just crazy to think that they would go, oh, it's BS, which I don't like the clickbaity title. And George didn't like it. And yet, yeah, they're trying to give the impression all of, oh, it doesn't count because it's not canon anymore, whatever. And then they're trying to use George Lucas quotes to back it up, which you can find George Lucas quotes of anything. But I think actual publications and the behind the scenes of the actual publications, being that George actually gave them the guidelines, the parameters, the background of the Sith and the Dark Jedi, the Jedi Civil War, all of that, in Golden Age of the Sith, is, as in the comics, what George gave them. Which, if it's Golden Age of the Sith, I believe it's the very start of it. Let me pull up the comic. Where it says this is the background to the Sith. Let me pull it up bigger. Yeah. History of the Sith. The ancient struggle of the light side and dark side, the first great schism of the Jedi Knights. The Dark Jedi, finally defeated after a century of bloodshed, took their battered ships into exile, crossing the galaxy into the unknown. There, the vanquished Dark Jedi found a primitive civilization, a new people to dominate, the Sith. The Dark Jedi were treated as gods. With unlimited resources and willing slaves, the Jedi exiles forged the Sith civilization into a new empire, bringing about the golden age of evil. And that's the background from George. So how is it a BS that George says it's what somebody made up? Yeah, he's the one who made it up. Maybe he's a fan of his own work. I'd hope he likes it at least. I get annoyed by this type of thing. I think especially because he is someone that has a larger following and is supposed to be a lore channel, and then he doesn't seem to have done research and going, hang on, this doesn't line up from this interpretation of said quote. But then again, Eckhart's Ladder, in general, has a bunch of new canon videos. Yep, look, there's a bunch of new canon. Lots of new canon. And so I don't know if it's a mentality I see with mixed canon. Anyway, I'm annoyed because I see Corey's data pad where I find they're trying to have people misinformed. Like this, even if you're saying about this quote, it needs context. You don't just clip it and go, ooh, your KOTOR was BS, ooh. It discredits the EU, yep. And it feels like they're just buying into whatever Disney says of, oh, the expanded universe wasn't canon and never will be, and it's not worth looking at. You gotta go look at our new stuff and everything. And it's dumb. And I know this is out of context, probably because it's a clip, or it's just a short thing he recorded. But, like, I get so annoyed at it. Especially, I think, after Corey doing the overblown controversy of Clone Wars lore video, I'm being annoyed at the fandom again, probably. Because of how much misinformation is spread. And people will look at this and go, oh yeah, well, Eckhart Slater, he's a trustworthy guy. I believe him. And not look into it further. And you need to. These actions, well, if that quote's accurate to talking about in regards to KOTOR and all that, because I feel like that quote was in context of the prequels, talking about the prequels and all of that. If it was accurate to what interpretation X saying here, then basically he would never have approved of any of the projects in that time period. Or SWTOR was a big one, they would have had to run that by him, 2011 still. At least he didn't look at them in depth, but he at least got the treatment, which is a plot outline, and he approved it. Which would say there are multiple Sith fighting multiple Jedi. And you have lots of books and comics in that doing that now.